Hi, this is Paul. Don't have time to do a full video on this, especially a full treatment. I don't have Fox News. Um, I was able to see a bootleg copy that was of the full interview that was on YouTube before it got taken down. You know, people in small channels will just quick put up an interview. They know that at some point Fox News is going to have them take it down. And there's a lot of clips on YouTube from the Kanye Tucker Carlson interview. This is very much along the lines of the Jon Stewart, Tucker Carlson conversation about how we use collective relevance realization, how we use people as collective relevance realization, and this also gets into the question about Christ as as sort of the ideal human through which all of this happens. Nate's been pursuing that in the comment section a little bit and on Twitter, and I really have to sort of this is something that John Vervaeke referred to in his conversation with Nathan Ormond, and it's something that Jonathan Peugeot. It's something I'm quite interested in. So it's along the lines of that. So I'm not necessarily going to go into right now the conversation between Kanye or Ye and Tucker Carlson. It's a very interesting interview. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the first half. It's fairly long, and because it's not on YouTube, it's not terribly easy for me to sort of grasp. But I've got a copy of it now, and I do want to go through it. And one of the really interesting things, because there's a whole bunch of other interviews around it. Some of you may know that I actually have a domain and a blog that I use for a filing cabinet called leadingchurch.com. I've had it for years, and you'll find all kinds of different things on that blog thanks to my ADHD mind. But I'll usually collect a number of things. And so Kanye's done a whole bunch of interviews, and the interviews that he's done have attracted a lot of attention. One of the interesting aspects of this, or one of the aspects of this that I often find interesting, is how often the question of his mental health will come up. And I mean, that's what's funny is that approach with someone like Ye or Kanye is nearly the definition of gaslighting. Now, that isn't to say that if Kanye would sit down with a medical doctor or a psychiatrist or a psychologist or someone, that they wouldn't have something to talk about. But the definition of sanity is a particularly interesting one, especially in terms of how things have been medicalized. If you, let's see, go back to again, if you want to see things that I'm seeing and thinking about, or just holding out there, there's a really interesting, oh shoot, why is that there? It seems to have gotten all mixed up together. Come on, let's refresh this. And no, I don't want page 2. I want page 1. I wrote a piece on the whole CRC same-sex marriage thing. Michael Heiser's Demons. I thought that was interesting. And if you want to know what I might be talking about in videos, you can almost always find stuff here on my blog that I've found and sort of set it aside. But this, a really interesting article on mere orthodoxy about Haunted by Mars Hill, which linked to a very interesting review of Chuck DeGroat, When Narcissism Comes to Church. And one of the complaints that he makes is that there's a substitution of therapeutic language for theological language. And in some ways, the attacking of Kanye as mentally ill, therefore anything he does can sort of be dismissed, is sort of along those lines. It's interesting how, of course, he and Candace Owens showed up at this big event with some T-shirts that said "White Lives Matter," and he talked to his father, former Black Panther, about it. And quite frankly, when I listened to Yee's description of his conversation with his father, it made total sense to me, because often when I listen to him, I don't know. I don't know if okay, let me back this up. Collective relevance realization. A lot of people love Kanye because he gives them a few sound bites of what they want to hear. And so he talks about God. He uses very evangelical language in some ways. He talks about being a Christian. He talks about being pro-life. He talks about this destruction of how many unborn black children by the enormous abortion rates in African American communities. I mean, he's just such an interesting blend of a voice that takes the black community seriously, plus Christianity, or his version of Christianity, plus where he's at in terms of his broken marriage and his trying to figure out custody. He's now moved next door to his ex-wife, and so that's obviously easier for the children. And again, to sort of just push him away as mentally ill says it's sort of it's the definition of gaslighting, and it's also sort of the definition of a bulverism, a massive bulverism, where we're going to discount everything he says for this reason. Now, again, I'm not a Candace Owens fan. I don't particularly like the political back and forth. I don't like how just these sort of little selective sound bites get used for political effect. Of course, you love Trump, and it's like he has every right to love Trump. Whether Trump should be loved in this way, that's a whole nother conversation. But I mean, part of the point that he makes is, well, now he's finding aid and comfort among the conservatives because he's attacked by the other side. It's a fascinating thing to watch from so many different levels. And the thing that struck me, though, was when I was listening to the Jordan Peterson Jordan Peterson release today with poor Jonathan Peugeot. How get a sense of, okay, Jordan's thinking, I'm going into a hard conversation. First it's with his friend Hurwitz, and now it's with this Islamic scholar. It's like, I got to bring Jonathan in with me. Jonathan's like becoming sort of Jordan's conversational bodyguard coming into these conversations. I just find it hilarious. I got to say, even though I haven't finished this conversation yet, and a lot of aspects of it didn't grab me, that there's this particular Muhammad Hijab, not high on my list of who I'd want to talk to, just because I don't know. He's not. Nothing I saw from him so far in this conversation led me to believe he'd be a satisfying conversation partner. I'll say it that way. But there is a segment in here where Jordan is talking about sanity that I thought about Kanye. I can't help but call him Kanye because I'm so used to, I guess, Ye. If we're gonna be always updating everyone's names, which is frankly a super annoying thing. It's also sort of an annoying thing to me when people name themselves. And I think it's a significant theological thing. I think it's a significant psychological thing when people name themselves. But it's not an uncommon practice. So Kanye or Ye, or I'm not sure what his parents named him. Again, Kanye is such an interesting figure. And I mean, on one hand, people want to dismiss him, but at the same time, yeah, I'm part of what will be tremendous fun 50 years from now are reading biographies of Jordan Peterson and Kanye West, because they are just such fascinating people who are living really fascinating lives and consequential lives in our time. But I'm distracting myself again. Let me pull up what I wanted to talk about.
Social integration. So you have to ask yourself, well, could you be sane if your marriage was insane? Could
let me back it up a little bit.
you're saying we're not to consider relationship to music, because look, to some degree, the three of us can sit on stage and everyone in the audience, we can be comfortable at the moment psychologically.
Yes.
So we're not too anxious and we're kind of engaged because there's a certain degree of playful
Did you see Jonathan's eyes just there? But you can't read too much into these things, but it was kind of funny. We can sit comfortably and Jonathan's like, well, I don't know.
So three of us can sit on stage and everyone in the audience, we can be comfortable at the moment psychologically.
Yes.
So we're not too anxious and we're kind of engaged because there's a certain degree of playful harmony that we've established.
Especially
Now,
with him now.
yeah. So there's some
my dark secrets about,
there's
my
some
violence.
fractiousness, right?
Yes.
But we're able to integrate that, and so that means we can remain calm. And so one of the things that indicates is that part of our ability to remain calm and focused
Yes.
is dependent on social integration. So you have to ask yourself, well, could you be sane if your marriage was insane? Could you be sane if your relationship with your children was too fractious? Could you be sane if you had no friends, if you didn't integrate yourself into the community and maybe the state and then maybe a higher vision? And as far as I can tell, the answer to that is no, you can't be sane by yourself.
And right there, I think, is something really profound and very helpful and very true and very interesting, that sanity is communitarian. It really is. And now you have to be careful here because there's all this talk about social constructs, that sex is a social construct and gender is a social construct, et cetera, et cetera. Sanity is also related to the rest of the world. It's the upper and lower register. I know sometimes I will try to back off of some sort of correspondence notions of truth. Correspondence notions of truth are essential. I am sitting at a time and place in the world right now, and the correspondence of, if I had a GPS here, exactly where I'd been and what time it is and the elevation and all of those things are germane. Now, particularly and to what degree they're germane, depending on all of the other aspects, is of course part of the conversation. But what he just said about sanity is so important. And so when you look at a guy like Kanye, who, had his marriage broken up, talks with a lot of clarity, and there's something prophetic about Ye or Kanye in terms of how he talks, because he is bold enough to say some things, and he's at a social position where he can see things and say things with a lot of truth about the way the world is. And now, part of the difficulty that we have with all of this is that words have limited power. They have tremendous power, but it's always limited, and it's limited in terms of mapping. So when you say something which maps a certain way, it can be very true, but it's seldom the whole truth. And this is part of the reason why narrative is such a powerful, powerful tool. So Peterson's comments about sanity, I think are super helpful, because we need to do relevance realization together, because it's not just relevant to me, although there is a me, and the individualism is here. A little bit earlier, Muhammad Jihad made a point about community and communal societies versus individualistic societies. I thought that was a good point. But sanity has everything to do with one's relationship to the whole picture, which means that critical items such as religion, which is in many ways the largest possible mapping that we're dealing with in the world, these things are vital.
It's not merely a matter of psychological integration. It's not merely a matter of the isolated individual. And of course,
and when he said, psychological integration, I mean, when they're sort of attacking Kanye, I think they're probably thinking much more of sort of a a materialist, oh, his brain isn't working right. All of this is leading to trying to integrate mappings of human beings that are not as individualistic as our culture has tended to presuppose. And part of the difficulty of using the Kanye stuff is, again, it's not on YouTube, and so I run the risks of taking time to put together a video, and I mean it's part of the reason I have these puppets here, because the Joe Rogan stuff is on Spotify and it's not on YouTube anymore, and it's not as easily used, and it can get anyway. Part of the difficulty, of course, is that in some place like Fox News, I mean, this is all done for a political outcome, and I don't know that for West politics, in fact, everything, when I listen to him, politics doesn't seem to be his highest priority, and it's fascinating. It's an incredible story. It's fascinating to just watch how it goes. Now, and other cynical views too, you could say, for Kanye West, this is just genius self-promotion. I mean, a young black man who's a musical star, who's a fashion mogul, who's been married to one of the most famous women on the planet, whose every move is studied and watched. Of course, for him to go on and to say these things is just money in the bank in some ways. I mean, that's another layer that this is all true. I don't know that he's doing all of this simply for that, because it seems so unscripted, which is part of the reason why a lot of people make the claims that they make. But again, this collective relevance realization, we work as we work together, and we not only stay sane in terms of talking together, we arrive at sanity, and even science. I mean, all the perspective on publishing in journals, peer-reviewed, all of this, that's all an attempt to keep correspondence with the lower register. And we do it all together and use all of this mapping, use all of this shortcut, and especially use relationships of trust. We ask ourselves, it's so foundational, it's almost binary. Do I trust this person? Then it gets a little higher resolution. Do I trust them for this? Do I trust them for that? Do I trust them for that? I'll often tell people that, I deeply trusted my father. My father did not have a malicious bone in his body, and anyone who knew my father would attest to that. Would I want my father to be president of the United States? Probably not. Why? Not a particularly good manager. He wasn't a manager. He was a pastor, and so you could trust him for some things, but you probably wouldn't want to trust him to run the country. And so part of what we sort of do automatically, so what we do naturally, is that we listen to each other and we figure out, what can I trust them for? How can I trust them with? When they're saying certain things, what nuggets can I take away? And we do this all together. And so again, we're sort of arriving at sanity by virtue of all of this conversation. Now, I think tomorrow I'm going to release a video, a conversation between Jacob, who's kind of in the universe of my channel, and Eamon and Catherine Wilson, who hosted the Thunder Bay event, and Father Eric, who's also been participating sort of in this little area. They did a wonderful conversation on Jacob's channel, and I asked Jacob for permission to repost it here, and I think I'm going to do that. And to me, that conversation just showed how part of what we're exploring are the limits of deriving extended community, now using Zoom, Discord, YouTube, all of these means in order to establish trust and community in an extended way, hopefully to arrive at sanity and truth. Because, finally, sanity is all about truth, about the healthy processing of all of the truth that we can find through all of the various ways in the world, and deriving a map of the universe that is as true as possible, and having all of our relationships within the universe be as good as possible. So a few comments on this, and I got to go and wrap this thing up. So tomorrow I will finish posting all of the Thunder Bay recordings. I think the last one there is the John Vervaeke guided meditation that happened on Sunday afternoon. And then all of the Thunder Bay postings will be on my channel, and they're all in a playlist. And I'm still not terribly happy with the way YouTube manages playlists, but if you figure out the playlist, you can go ahead and play them all back to back to back to back. And then I think I'm going to then the posting of the conversation between Catherine and Eamon and Jacob and Father Eric, I think sort of nicely rounds out the Thunder Bay 2022 chapter. So that's enough for now.